The lemon meringue pie has a casing made of shortcrust, a lemon curd filling and a meringue topping. To begin with, you need to weigh out your shortcrust pastry ingredients, which is always half fat to flour, and in this case it's 100 grams of flour and 50 grams of chilled butter. The butter needs to be chopped into small pieces and chilled so that you can rub it in to get a breadcrumb consistency. And you do it just with your fingers and thumbs, trying not to get the palm of your hands as part of the process, because that's quite warm and that will melt the butter. We want to keep the butter quite chilled. This is quite hard work. You could do a casing of digestive biscuits with melted butter instead and put that into the casing. And the casing will then be slightly crunchier, slightly sweeter. With this, you can also add 20 grams of icing sugar to the casing, the shortcrust casing, to make it sweeter. So it's up to you whether you want to make that adjustment. Once you've got a breadcrumb consistency, you start adding the cold water a little bit at a time, being very careful not to add too much, because this needs to be hydrated just enough, but not too much that it's sticky and then you have to overhandle it. A shortcrust pastry mustn't be overhandled, otherwise it stops being short and melts in the mouth and becomes hard and like a rock. Once you've got the mixture together and the bowl is nice and dry of ingredients, you very quickly roll it out, unless it's getting sticky, in which case put it in the chiller for a little bit. Drape it into the tin, making sure that the edges go right into the corners of the tin, right into the base, so that you don't end up with any swoops on it. Keep the overhang a little bit. They can be cut off after it's been baked. Then we need to blind bake it. And here you want to actually just press the sides against the tin so that you get the fluted edge. This shows up the detail of a highly plastic pastry, which will take up the shape. Then you dock the pastry, scrunch up a little bit of parchment paper and add some clay beads or some rice so that you can blind bake this. Blind bake means no filling, because this has to be a blind baked filling that's completely waterproofed and baked. Right at the end, you can see it's nice and golden brown, and the edges need to be chopped off at this stage. Then you're going to make the lemon curd filling. So there's water, there's a zest of lemon, making sure you don't get any of the white bits in, because the white bits is the pith, and the pith is very bitter. So a zester is better than a grater for this. And it just takes the top layer of yellow and leaves the white behind. This adds a freshness and a zestiness to the filling. When you've done this, you need to cut the lemons in half, making sure that you juice them and you don't get any of the pith or the pips in. The pips will be bitter as well. So you can see there where the pith is. Juice it, and the pips get left behind by the teeth of the juicer, as you can see here. And there's a little moat around the teeth that allows you to gather the liquid but not the pips. Add that to the saucepan. And then add your sugar and your cornflour, and if you want to, a little bit of vanilla. And this needs to be all stirred together. So the cornflour, the sugar, the lemon zest, the lemon juice, and the water that's in the recipe. And mix it until it looks like a milky liquid. Now we need to gelatinize it to thicken it into a curd. And you're going to gelatinize it, and the cornflour will be the thickener. That's the thing that causes the gelatinization process. And while it's milky at the moment, when you add heat and keep stirring, the gelatinization turns the whole liquid to a sort of translucent Vaseline consistency, which holds its shape when you cut into it. So here we'll get quite a thick gelatinized filling that when you cut into it holds the side really well and is also firm enough to hold the meringue topping. So you can see here I'm adding heat and keeping the mixture moving with my balloon whisk to make sure that none of it settles to the base of the pan and burns. And you're going to keep doing this. Might take quite a while, and you'll sit there thinking nothing's happening, and then all of a sudden it will start to thicken and go translucent. So here you can see it starts to thicken from the centre. You can see it's thickening there. And you have to keep that whisk moving. Regulate the heat by pulling the pan off the heat if you need to. And then as soon as it's thickened, it starts to go clear, and that's when you know that it's fully done. Takes a fair bit of energy to keep this liquid moving. And there it is. It is now fully gelatinised, and you keep stirring it until it cools. You don't add the egg while it's hot, otherwise the egg will scramble. I've added a little bit of liquid because I thought it was a bit thick, but this is the consistency you need. So this will now sit and cool while I do the meringue. And when you're doing the meringue, you have to degrease the bowl. Degreasing is just taking an acid like vinegar or lemon and wiping the bowl that you're going to be whisking the egg whites in very well. And this basically gets rid of any residual grease, which will stop the egg whites from creating volume. And you need to do it with the whisk beaters as well. Everything needs to be really well degreased for meringues to work properly. I've used slightly older egg whites here, so my meringue won't be fully volumised, but it'll be in proportion to the pie. You also want the egg whites to come to room temperature, which might take half an hour out of the fridge. Once you've degreased everything, you'll put the egg whites into the bowl and make sure there's no egg yolk in there, because that's got fat in it and that will stop it rising. And then you beat it until the egg whites become foamy. Don't add any sugar until the egg whites are foamy and have a slightly soft peak to them. Keep the sugar there ready, and it needs to be caster sugar so that it dissolves quickly. Granulated sugar takes too long and you'll end up with a flatter meringue with pools of liquid sugar in there. So it's coming now to the point where there's enough meringue foam, and I've got little peaks, and I'm going to add a little bit of the sugar and then beat for 30 seconds. And you're going to just keep doing that, adding a little bit of the sugar and beating for 30 seconds. And the idea is the 30 seconds are enough to dissolve the sugar into the foam, which helps to stabilise the mixture and stop it collapsing and going back to liquid. And you'll do this with the complete measure of sugar so that you end up with a glossy mixture which has volume. Now, as I said, these eggs aren't fully fresh, they're actually 2 or 3 days old, so they won't get to the same volume as a fresh egg. This takes a fair bit of patience because you have to keep adding the sugar a little bit at a time and then mixing for 30 seconds. Hold the bowl really well and make sure that your hands don't get caught into the beaters. You can see it's getting more glossy now. It's also really important not to overbeat, because that can make the volume go flat and you're basically beating out all the air bubbles that you've beat in when you were trying to foam the eggs. But you can see now the mixture's stickier, glossier, and you can see the trail of the beaters in the mixture. You know that it's ready to hold its shape when it's that, and you can feel that the sugar is dissolved. And when you've got a little bit of a glossiness on it and 2 little peaks sitting proud of the mixture, it's ready to go. So now we need to go back to that cool gelatinised liquid and add the egg yolks and beat them in. Now the mixture hasn't been cooled fully, it's still got a little bit of warmth to it, but not enough that it ends up scrambling the egg yolks. And then this mixture, which has got a lot of sugar in it, which helps to preserve it from the salmonella in the eggs, that's now going to go into your filling, topped with your meringue, and then baked until the meringue goes golden brown. This mixture, having a very low bake on the egg yolks, needs to be eaten the same day and chilled until it's ready to eat. And you can see that I'm getting the meringue to the level just near to the top of the pastry casing. And the pastry casing is dangerously thin so that it doesn't overwhelm the proportion of the pie. It's supposed to be a little bit of a show off. And then you take your meringue and pile it on using a spatula. And I always put it onto a square tray so that I don't end up accidentally dropping the mixture as I'm taking it to the oven. Just keeps a more stable base. And you can see there's volume in the egg now, it's holding its shape. And we're going to put all of that on the top. The higher it is, the more show-offy it is. This one's not going to be particularly high, but it will have a nice meringue texture and a crusty top because I'm going to bake it until the top is quite caramelised. Some people prefer a bright white top, but I always prefer it a little bit darker because it adds a little bit more of an intense caramel flavour to the meringue. Some people also like to pipe this on, and if you've got a very high volume mixture, you can definitely get enough body to pipe a really nice shape. Make sure your hands are clean if you're going to be using them in the mixture. And then take this whole tray to a hot oven and keep a very strong eye on it because the meringue will burn very quickly. You just want it to go golden brown and scorch the top, but not blacken it down and make it burnt. And this is it coming out now. I've got to be very careful about how I remove the tin, and you can see the fluted edge there in the casing, and that's taken up the edge of the casing because of the plasticity in the butter. And some meringues are a lot higher, but you should be able to see very definite different layers. So the description and further explanation and recipe are in the description below.